Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me in our series that will help you to get started in notes as well as prepare for my upcoming academy, the Note Buyers Academy, that's coming up in September 19th through the 22nd. So last time we talked about how to find notes, and tonight I want to share with you how to evaluate the notes. Okay, so get a pen or pencil ready, get a pad of paper, and get ready to take some notes, because this is extremely valuable information. And actually, it will help you a lot. Once you find a note, it will give you an overview of what to look for, so that you know whether it's a good note or a bad note, whether it's worth pursuing or whatever. Okay, so get ready, and here we go. So I'm going to come over here and share right here. See, I'm getting technical. Okay, I think we're good to go here. So again, we're going to be I'm sharing about how to evaluate a note. Okay, so it's set here. There we go. Okay, there are 4 things that you want to consider when you're evaluating a note, and I'm going to walk you through each one of them. The first one is the collateral itself. The second one is, I don't know why this is not advancing. It worked when we practiced. There we go. Okay, the second one is the note, the promissory note. The third is the payor. You want to know who's making payments and are they able to make payments. And the fourth one is, this is not working. I don't know why. If you have any suggestions, Matthew, I don't know why. Okay, now it's working.
Oh, looks like your mouse was going on to that other screen. Try to keep it on the presentation view one.
Okay, I thought that I had. So sorry about that. So we're going to look at the collateral, we're going to look at the note, and we're going to look at the payor. And last but not least, we want to check and see what the yield would be. If you're holding it, you want to know, is it the kind of return that you want? Or if you're going to flip it, can you make enough money to flip it? So let's walk through each one of those items. So when somebody calls me up and they have a note that they would like a quote on, the first question that I ask is, what is the loan to value? The most important thing when I look at a note is how much equity is in that property. Now, mind you, as an advanced technique, if there isn't a lot, we can do a partial, and there's other things that we can do. But in general, I want to know how much equity is in the property. And to determine that, what we're going to look at is the loan to value, or commonly known as the LTV. And the LTV, it is a measure of how much financing is on the property, okay? So it's the total balances of all the liens divided by the current fair market value of the property. Now, there's 2 ways to look at this. If there's a first and second, we're going to look at all the liens. But if we're just buying the first, we may just put in the value of the first, okay? So if we have a $100,000 property and there's a first of 80, then our loan to value, as far as we are concerned, would be 80%, okay? So let's look at this here. Let's say that you have this property that's worth $100,000. And let's say there is a $60,000 mortgage on it, okay? Very simply, our loan to value is 60%, okay? But what we're really interested in is what's left. We want to know how much equity is in the property, okay? And obviously, the remaining equity would be 40%. So this tells us that there's $40,000 of extra value that is protecting this $60,000 mortgage. Another way to look at that is, if the value of the property dropped, it could drop by 40%, and you could still sell the property for enough to cover what is owed on it. Okay, so the more equity, first of all, the safer the deal. Okay, and the more equity, the more opportunity there is for extra profit in the event that the borrower defaulted and you wound up taking the property over and having to resell it. Okay, so the loan to value allows us to see how much equity is protecting the balance that is owed on the loan. However, you know that we buy at a discount. Okay, so there's another thing that I sometimes use instead of loan to value, and that is investment to value. And that allows us to see how much equity is protecting the actual amount of our investment. Okay, so think of it like this: when I buy a note, I don't usually just want to get my investment back. I want to make sure I get the entire amount that is owed. So I'm going to look at my loan to value. But sometimes there are notes that maybe the loan to value is a little questionable, but it's such a great note that I ask myself, you know what? How risky is this as far as the actual amount that I'm putting out? So in that case, as a backup, I'm going to look at the investment to value. So the investment to value is simply the total amount that you invest in the note, including your expenses, divided by the current fair market value of the property. Now, I want to add something here. If the property has sold within the last year, so if the note has not been seasoned or they have not been making payments for over a year, then as a general rule of thumb, you always want to use the sale price of the property. Okay, but if the note is seasoned for more than a year, then you want to find out what is the real value now. Has it appreciated? So what that keeps you from doing is having someone go in and they buy it. They buy a property for really cheap, and then all of a sudden they're telling you it's worth 100,000 when maybe it's really not worth 100,000. So just as a general rule of thumb, if the property is sold in the last year, use the sale price. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We've got our $100,000 property. You've got a $60,000 note. If you buy that note for $45,000, then your investment to value, very simply, is 45%. Okay, so this tells you that the value of the property could drop by 55%. And you could still, if you got that property back at a sale, you could still sell the property and at least get all of your investment back. Okay, so I hope you see the difference. Loan to value is a measure of how to protect whatever is owed on the note. Investment to value is a measurement that allows you to see how much equity protects your actual investment. Okay. Okay, so what does this mean? How does this really come into play? Well, I briefly mentioned it. You want to look at, in a worst case scenario, if the borrower does not pay and you foreclose and you wind up with the property. There's two things that can happen at foreclosure. First of all, if someone comes in and bids high enough, you're going to get paid off. You'll get paid whatever is owed to you, okay? But let's say no one shows up at the sale and you're the only bidder. And of course, you're going to be there bidding whatever is owed to protect your position. Okay, so you foreclose and you wind up getting the property. The big question is, can you sell it for enough to recoup your money? So let's look at that. Again, we've got our $100,000 property and we're going to buy a $60,000 mortgage for $40,000. So if the bid goes to $60,000, you're going to get paid off immediately and you make $20,000. What happens to your rate of return then? It skyrockets, because instead of getting that $20,000 spread out over 10 or 20 or 30 years, you're going to wind up getting that $20,000 in just a matter of a couple months or so, which then, because you bought the note at a discount, it will make your rate of return go up, okay? Now, on the other hand, if no one shows up at the sale and you wind up getting the house, then your return also skyrockets. What's going to happen is you get the house, okay? Now, certainly if you get the house, you can do whatever you want to with it. You could keep it for a rental, you can sell it, you can move in, it's your house. But I like to assume that I just want to cash out. When I'm evaluating a note, I say, okay, let's assume that I just want to get my money back and my profit. So if this house is worth $100,000, do you think you could sell it very quickly for 80 cents on the dollar? I'm thinking so. So let's take a look. Let's say that you put this on the market for 80 grand. What happens then? Okay, you're going to make $40,000 profit right off the bat. Okay, so you just increased your profit. Instead of just making 20,000, like if the note had paid in full or if somebody had bid at the sale, now you're going to make 40,000 in a matter of a couple months, and you have doubled your profit. Okay, so, or like I said, you could just keep the $100,000, and here you could keep the $100,000 house, and that would have meant that you had acquired that property for 40 cents on the dollar, because you have only $40,000 invested. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. And this is the bottom line for how do I determine if this is a note that I want to buy. I want to think of worst case scenario. If I wind up with the property, can I sell it quickly and not only get my investment back, but also a nice profit besides? Okay, so in the marketplace, there are some general loan to value guidelines that we use, okay? The safest investment that you can make is in a single family owner occupied home. And that's primarily because most people, the first thing they pay is their mortgage, okay? So they're going to protect that if they're living there. So on a single family owner occupied home or note secured by a home, we would generally be willing to go up to a 75 to 80% loan to value. On the other hand, what if we're looking at a single family non-owner occupied property? Okay, that's a little bit more risky, because what happens if the borrowers or the tenants don't pay? You know, if the tenants don't have money for rent, is that owner of that property still going to be able to cover the mortgage payment? So that's a little bit more risky. So we want to have just a little bit more equity in the property. So we typically would want to stay at a 70 to 75% loan to value. Okay? And then what if we're looking at a multifamily property or even a commercial property? Those are a little bit more risky, just because of the management scenario, as well as what happens if you get the property back. It takes longer normally to sell a commercial property or a multifamily unit than it does a multifamily property than it does to sell a single family, because you don't have as large of a target market. There's a whole lot more people out there that'll buy a single family than there are that will buy multifamilies or commercial properties. And then the most risky note to invest in would be one that is secured by raw land. And that's simply because if you get that land back, it's much harder to sell raw land than it is to sell a single family property. And I would throw into that category also single-use facilities. Perfect example is a car wash. If you buy a note secured by a car wash and you foreclose and get that car wash back, you have a very limited number of potential buyers for that property, okay? But do you see that if you used these guidelines, and let's say that you bought a note secured by a car wash at a 50% loan to value, do you see that if you wind up getting that property back, that you could sell it for half of its value and still get everything that was owed to you, okay? So by making sure that there is plenty of equity in the property, that's what makes your note investment safe. So you might want to jot these guidelines down and consider take those into consideration when you're looking at a note. Okay. The other thing that I take into account is there hard equity in the property? What's the difference between hard equity and soft equity? Hard equity is a cash down payment. It is money that has been invested into this note, into this property. And it could be either in the way of a cash down payment, or it could be just a lump sum principal pay down. They might inherit some money and just say, hey, I'm going to pay an extra $20,000 on my note. Okay. Or it could just be the routine monthly pay down. If the note has been seasoned for several years, and assuming it's an amortized note and it's not interest only, then every month part of their monthly payment is going to go towards paying the principal down. So that's another way to get hard equity. I also will consider proven exchange value. What is that? Well, when they buy the property, did they offer a car or a boat as a down payment? It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does. Well, I want to go look at the Kelley Blue Book on that car and say, what is the real value of that car? And if they can prove the value, then I would also consider that as well. So hard equity in general is cash that the borrowers have put into the property. Okay. Now let's compare that to soft equity. Soft equity is appreciation. And sometimes that's real and sometimes it's not. You never know. Okay. Sweat equity is another form of soft equity. They can say, look, yeah, I just bought this property for $80,000 3 months ago, but hey, I put in a new kitchen, I remodeled the bath, I put on a new roof. I've been working really hard in my spare time and have done a lot of work on it. And sometimes it's legitimate and sometimes it's not. Okay. So you have to take that into consideration and you have to weigh that and decide if those are real numbers or not. Okay. Okay, so now that I know how much equity is in the property, I also want to look at the collateral itself. What type of property is it? In general, my rule of thumb is it a property that I would want to own? If I would not be willing to own that property, and by own it, I mean own it and resell it, okay? Or own it and hold it. So if it's not something that I would want, then I probably don't want to buy that note, okay? I also want to look at the condition of the property. I learned early on not to buy notes that are in the process of being rehabbed. Now, if you're a rehabber, that could be a great niche for you to get into. But me, if I get a note back, a property back, and it's been totally stripped and is in the middle of being remodeled, oh my gosh, that would be a nightmare for me. So I am not going to buy a note that is secured by a property that needs rehabbing. I also want to look at the location of the property. If I am flipping the note, it can be anywhere in the country as long as it's not in a war zone. However, if I am going to buy the note to hold, most likely I want that to be within a couple hours driving distance of my house. Because if I do wind up getting the property back, I want to make sure that I can handle it. If I have to list it, clean it up, whatever I need to do. I also want to consider the lien position. Now, I don't want to just make a blanket statement that I don't buy seconds, because occasionally I do. But as a general rule of thumb, I'm only interested in buying first mortgages. Exceptions to that would be if we're looking at a property in California. I mean, the fact of the matter is that most properties in California have 2 or 3 mortgages on them. So if you're not interested in buying a second or third, you might not be buying many mortgages in California. So, but lien position is definitely a consideration. When probably about 10 years or so ago in Ohio, they changed the law and they said that if you that you had to have a mortgage license if you were going to collect money on a second mortgage. I honestly don't think that applied to seller carrybacks, but the law was very vague. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to buy any more seconds. Well, and I was kind of worried because I thought that would put a huge dent in my my note buying. But I quickly realized that although I looked at a lot of seconds, very few of them were really viable possibilities, because most of the seconds are little 10, 20% down payments. And so the loan to value is very low. They're behind a large first, and they're really not something that I want to buy. So in general, we want it to be a first position, or if it is a second position, it can't be just a little 10 or 20% second. It needs to be a substantial second mortgage that has equity. So this is my cardinal rule. I mentioned it. Never buy a note secured by a property that you would not want to own or sell. And if you use that as an all-around rule, it will save you so much headache and probably save you some losses, okay? Because think about it. If you are not willing to get that property back and sell it or keep it, then you really have no security. If you are not willing to deal with a strip mall in California or a warehouse in Timbuktu, then you're probably thinking, man, I hope they pay, because the last thing I want to do is foreclose. Well, if that's the truth, that the last thing you want to do is foreclose, then you sure better not buy that note, because that means that you have no security. If you're not willing to foreclose, get the property, sell it to recoup your money. That is an extremely risky investment for you. I hope you see that. Okay, so we've just talked about examining the collateral. And the single most important thing to look at on the collateral is what is the loan to value and what type of collateral is it. Okay? So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the note itself. Okay? The note is the promise to pay. The first thing I want to look at is, what are the terms? What's the interest rate? What's the payment amount? Is this a single payment balloon that has no monthly payments, but it's going to have a lump sum 5-year balloon payment? Well, if I'm looking for monthly cash flow, that's not going to work for me. If the interest rate is 15%, that should be a major red flag, because why would somebody be willing to pay 15%? To me, that's an indication that that must be a very risky note, and the borrower must have serious financial issues, bad credit, bankruptcy, whatever, because why would they be willing to pay 15%? Okay. If I am looking for a short-term investment, then what if this is a 30-year note? Now, certainly, even if I invested it in a 30-year note, if I wanted my cash out in 2 or 3 years, I could turn around and sell it, okay, and I could get my money back. But in general, you want to try to gauge your investments to fit what your particular goals are. I also want to look and see if there is a balloon on the note. What is a balloon? It is simply like a call where they say at a certain time, usually it's common to have a 5-year balloon, a 7-year balloon, 10-year balloon. And so they may be making payments for like 60 payments, and then there's a 5-year balloon. What that means is whatever amount is owed on that note at the end of 5 years or whenever the balloon is due, the borrowers need to refinance and pay you off in full. Okay? A balloon is a great way to increase the value of a note, because when you're looking at quoting on a note, if I'm going to compare a note that has a 5-year balloon on it versus a note that is fully amortized over 30 years, in general, the note that with the balloon is going to give me a higher rate of return than if it's fully amortized. However, so people think, oh, great, I'm just always going to add a balloon on whenever I sell a property. Well, first of all, you need to be careful because of Dodd-Frank. There is only one time that you can have a balloon, and that is if you qualify for the one-time exclusion. That means that you're creating a seller carryback note, not a private loan, but a seller carryback note, and you have not done any other notes for the previous 12 months, okay? So in any given 12-month period, this would be the only note that you have created, and it is a seller carryback. In that case, you can add a balloon to it. And quite frankly, I would do it then, because here's the thing, you can always extend the note later, okay? And meanwhile, if you should need your money in 5 years, you know it's going to pay off. But let's say it comes up to be about 4 years, and you're thinking, I don't really want to be paid off. I think I'd like to stay in this. You simply contact the payor and say, hey, what are your plans? You know, I wouldn't mind staying in this note. Why don't we extend the balloon for another 2 years or whatever you're interested in doing? So the balloon sounds really good. And when I see a balloon, I like that, except for one thing. There's a caveat to that. And that is, are they able to refinance the balloon? If the borrower has a low credit score or has had credit issues, then they might have difficulty refinancing that balloon, okay? And so in that case, the balloon is a negative rather than a positive. When I see a note like that, I don't turn it down. What I do is simply base my quote as though it's going to take 10 years to pay off instead of 5, or base it like there is no balloon. So that's going to lower my offer for that balloon, but at least I'm still able to buy it. Okay? So balloons are a double-edged sword. They will give you a higher rate of return, but you need to make sure that the borrower is able to refinance and pay you off. Okay, the next thing I want to look at with the note is, what is the pay history? And that is the beauty of investing in existing seller carryback notes. The thing is that they have a pay history. Unlike if you are going to be, if you're going to do a private loan, you don't know if they're going to pay you or not, right? And so the pay history, let me put it this way. If somebody's been made payments on time for the last year or so, then it's unlikely that all of a sudden they're going to quit making payments unless something happens, okay? And so the pay history is extremely important, okay? And how do we make sure of a pay history? We ask for copies of canceled checks or copies of bank statements showing that they've been deposited. I'm going to stop sharing here for just a second, okay? and let's just talk for a minute. So pay history is very important, and the longer that they've been making payments on time, the better. Okay, it shows that it is a quality note if they've been paying on time. They can be a few days late, but you don't want to buy any notes. Well, I shouldn't say that, because you can certainly buy any kind of note you want, but you would lower the price if they've had some late pays. And generally speaking, a late pay would be anything that's more than 10 or 15 days late. Okay. If a note is more than 30 days late, that note is in default. And we're going to use a completely different scenario or set of criteria for preparing a quote in that case. Okay. So the next thing is the note seasoned? And of course, as I mentioned, that is when how long have payments been made? And the longer the seasoning, the better. Okay. And again, that's one of the beauties of buying an existing note, is that it does have seasoning. Now, one of the things that you're going to run into as you're looking for notes is reperforming notes. They're bank notes that were originally originated by a bank, but someone has purchased that. It could be like a hedge fund. They've gone into default. A hedge fund maybe bought it. Sometimes they wind up with moms and pops, private investors. And you'll see when you get the note that it is actually a bank, even a Fannie Mae type note. Okay. And somebody has worked with that borrower, probably done a modification of that note, and now they've got that note reperforming. Would I buy that note? Yes, I would. It's not something that I actively market for, because quite honestly, I think that's a little bit more risky than a seller carryback where the people have never, ever been in default. Okay. But nonetheless, if it's been reperforming, my question is, for how long? If it has been reperforming for a year or more, then that's worthy of consideration. I also want to take a look at it, and I want to know, why were the people in default? Did they lose their job? Was it a medical problem? What was their credit like before? If they're habitually behind on payments, and they filed bankruptcy 2 or 3 times in their life and all of that, then this reperforming note is something that I'm not interested in. But if they previously had good credit and they paid on time, but it was a temporary setback that caused them to get behind, and now they have restructured that note and they've been making payments, then that would be a note that I would consider buying. Okay, and so this brings us to the next question. Is it a true seller carryback, or is it a bank loan, or even a private loan? Here's the thing. I am more interested in buying a seller carryback. And to me, those are worth more. And the reason is because there are a lot of exemptions, if you will, with a seller carryback. When you do a private loan to someone, unless it's a commercial loan, like I love private commercial loans, because in most states, there's no usury, there's no licensing requirements for commercial loans. So I'll do those all day long. But if somebody comes to me and they said, I lent someone $100,000 secured by their personal residence, and I'm interested in selling it. No, I am not interested in buying that unless they have a license, which 9 out of 10 times they don't. The fact is that you do not need to have a license to carry back a mortgage. And you don't need to do all of those disclosures and things that banks have to do. And you're kind of grandfathered in. And it's just a much safer deal to buy a seller carryback, where a homeowner is making payments on a seller carryback rather than on a private loan or a bank loan. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I also want to know, how long did the note seller own the house before they sold it? Why do I want to know that? Because I want to know if this was part of a package of loans, maybe, or not loans, but maybe some REOs, or it could have been a package of loans and they got the deed and now they have sold it, maybe on a contract for deed. They might have had 10, 20, 30 properties that they did this with. I really, really prefer to find the mom and pops where that's the only house that they have ever sold and carried back a note, because generally speaking, those are much safer deals. That's not to say that I won't consider the other, but my preference is to find the mom and pop deals. And as we said in the last webinar, where do you find those? And if you missed that webinar, you want to go back and watch that. And by the way, if you missed it, make sure that you're on our join our list. Go to thenotebuyer.com and join our list, or you can email us at info@thenotebuyer.com, and Matthew will be happy to send you a link so you can sign up for the webinar series. I'm assuming that since you're on here, you're signed up, but sometimes people forward a link and you don't really have access to the others. But where do you find the seller carrybacks? I go through that in detail on the last webinar. You need to market specifically for those. So check out that webinar so I don't get off track here. Okay. Is there a personal guarantee on the note? Why do I ask this? Because a lot of times I will get notes where there is a corporation or an LLC that is the payor. I have no problem with that, but I want someone to guarantee that note. They can do the note in the name of their LLC or in the name of a trust, but I want someone who says, I'm going to make sure that payments are received. And if they don't, I'm going to go after that person. Okay. And so it's important to me that there is a personal guarantee on any notes that I buy. There are some institutional buyers that will buy a note without a personal guarantee. But again, I'm very conservative and I want to make sure I'm going to be paid. And I don't want someone who has a bunch of notes in an LLC and they don't pay and they just close the LLC and they don't worry about it. That's not the type of people that I want to be working with. Okay, so we've talked about the collateral and we've talked about the note. The next thing that we're going to look at is the payor, okay? And the payor, the first thing that I look at is the credit history, okay? Do they have good credit? Now, when I had a big office and lots of employees, I used to belong to the credit bureau and I could run credit on people. But now that I am a cottage industry, or I have a cottage business where I work from home, I can't join the credit bureau. So what I do, and it's been very effective, is when I talk to the payor, I explain that I could pull their credit, and I technically don't have to have their authorization to do that, but I think it's a good idea to. But since I have a legitimate business reason, since I'm buying this note, I could just pull their credit. But if I do that, it's going to ding their credit score by 4 points. Okay. And so I tell them, look, if you'll just go to creditkarma.com or Free Credit Report and you will pull your own credit, make sure that there is a credit score with that credit report and send that to me. That way it protects your credit score. And they're always willing to do that. Okay. So that's how I've got around that. So I want to look at the payor's credit. I want to know what their employment is. Now, if the borrower does not, or excuse me, the note seller does not know, the only way to get this, you can't force the borrower to tell you, but I always do a borrower interview and I just casually talk to them and I find out, what they do. But 9 out of 10 times, the note seller knows that, hey, he works at the gas station on the corner. Hey, she's a nurse, whatever. They generally have an idea of what the borrowers do for a living. And I just want to know, how secure is their employment? And this may not be politically correct, but I do want to look at what stage of life are they in. Are we talking about a single parent with 4 kids that's struggling to keep a job? Or are we talking about 2, empty nesters, professional people that, they all their kids are grown and gone. They don't even have people kids in college. And so now they've got all this disposable income. Obviously, that's going to be a much safer note than someone who is struggling to provide for a family. And please don't get the idea that I won't buy notes where there's a single person struggling, because I absolutely will. I just need to take that into account so that I can make my decision accordingly. Okay. And if there is a problem with the payor, a lot of times you can get additional guarantors on that note. So let me go back. I've been talking here, and let me go back. And if I can remember how to do this, I am going to stop. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Matthew, I'm getting good enough. I won't need you anymore. Just kidding. Just kidding. So I wanted to show you that this is the list of the payor. And in fact, I want to back up so you get the whole, you get the last screen too. I got carried away talking. Okay, so this was the last screen. So you got everything. If you want to do a screenshot of that or whatever you're doing, that's everything we talked about on the note. And then I want to move forward and show you, we just got done talking about the payor, the credit history, the employment, stage of life, and the additional guarantors. And so now I want to reemphasize, I haven't talked about this yet. The first cardinal rule was never buy a note secured by a property you would not want to own. But my second cardinal rule is never buy a note when you would not foreclose on the payor. If you're not willing to foreclose on the payor, then you have no security. Okay. You want to take that into consideration. If you will follow those 2 cardinal rules, that's like as basic as I can get with evaluating a note. Okay. Because if you would not want to own that property, or if you would not be willing to foreclose, then you have no security. Okay. So keep that in mind when you're doing your evaluations. So now we are ready to move on to the next thing, which we've talked about collateral. We've talked about the note itself, the payor. The next thing we're looking at is the yield. So if you want to hold the note, I guess I better go back over here to this. And let's share here again. Okay, if you want to hold the note, then you got to ask yourself, do you like the yield that you're going to get? Okay, and what determines the yield? All these things that we're talking about. Okay, if everything looks really, really good on it, right now for a top note, and I really shouldn't say this, I tell people never to say it, but I'm trying to give you a general idea. On a really good note, I'm going to probably offer that at 7.5 to 8% yield. Okay. On the other hand, I'm not going to buy a note where I'm just getting an 8% yield. Not when I can go out and buy notes. If I'm doing my marketing, I can typically get a note, if I'm buying it at a discount, that gives me a 20-25% yield. So why would I buy a note from somebody else and just make 8% on my money? And that's a very good price for the note. Okay, that is the market value of that note. So there needs to be some reason why I can get this at a good discount. Maybe the person really needs to sell quickly. They need the money fast. There could be a multitude of reasons. Maybe they've already made a whole lot of money on this deal, and so they're just looking to cash out. But if they are willing to accept less, when they're willing to accept less, that means you're going to make more. Your rate of return will be higher. So you need to take these things into consideration and say, what is the yield? Is it a yield that I would be happy with? Okay. And does the risk match the reward? So if I think that this is, like, let's say there's very little seasoning. Well, if I'm only making 8% on my money and it's very little seasoning, then that's way too risky and that's not worth it. Okay. On the other hand, if maybe I can make 12% on it. Let's wait until I get to the tea values, and the next screen will really help you on this. Okay. Okay. So what I do when I'm looking at a note, and I seriously do this, this is not just for this webinar that I'm putting this up. I consider all the factors that we've just talked about. And what allows me to close more deals than other people is that I try to make a note work. I look to see what offsetting factors there are. For example, I just mentioned no seasoning. All right, so this is a brand new note. There's no pay history. But look, if the payor has excellent credit and they've been at their job for 5 years and are probably going to be there for another 20 years, if it's got a low loan to value, wouldn't that still be a good deal? Okay. And so I look at exactly that kind of thing, and I will make my my offer accordingly. Right now, one of my students sent me a note, and I know you're probably watching. I'll be careful not to mention any disclosing factors, but this person, the payments have been made for 2 years, but they've always been made in cash. There's no proof of pay history. But everything else on this note is great. The people put 20% down. They've been making payments for 2 years. The house is newly renovated. The borrower or the note seller, he worked on that property and totally renovated it before he even sold it to them. The borrower is the note seller is an experienced note holder. He doesn't need the cash. He owns all kinds of property and is very, very well off. He's just a sophisticated person that clearly doesn't have to sell this note. So everything looks really good. The only thing that's wrong is that we don't have proof of pay history. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the note seller and the payor, that they both sign affidavits saying, 24 payments have been made on this. They've always been made on time. There's no offsetting factors on it. If you're not familiar with them, we'll talk about that. I think that's the next webinar. But if not, go to your master guide and look up due diligence, and you'll see, or go to your forms library, and you'll see the mortgagee and mortgagor affidavit. Perfect time to use that. And then there's a third affidavit called the pay history affidavit that I'm going to have the note seller sign. I've also considered I can ask the note seller to sell with recourse. If they've always paid on time, then what's the problem with him guaranteeing the note? So in other words, I'm going to look for ways around it. And that goes back to the T-graph that I just showed you. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do if I am going to buy the note to hold. But what if I'm going to flip the note? If I'm going to sell the note, then the big question is, can I build enough spread in that deal so that I can buy it and resell it to a private investor or an institutional buyer? So can I get a good enough deal on it, a large enough discount? Like, as a general rule of thumb, if I can't make $3,000 on a deal, it's not worth my time. Okay. I like to make at least $5,000 on a deal, but if I can make $3,000 and it looks like a fairly clean deal, I will go ahead and do that. So you've got to look at, if you're flipping the note, can you make enough money to warrant the time that it takes to put into the deal? Okay. Okay. So let's now look at our criteria here. Matthew, you want to take me back to stop the screen sharing real quick, and let's go back. Thank you, by the way, for taking care of that for me. So in the master guide, you're going to find at the end of the chapter on evaluating a note this criteria for purchasing performing mortgage notes. As I said, the first thing that I'm always going to look at is the loan to value. And make sure you learn those guidelines, and that you make sure that when you're looking at a note that they conform to the, like if it's a residential, if it's secured by a single family owner occupied house, it's not worth, the loan balance is not more than 80%. Okay. Don't know what happened here, but we went forward. I want to go to these criteria. Okay, so we look at the loan to value, then we look at hard equity. We talked about that. Is there actually cash invested in this note? And that would be either original down payment or seasoning, and the loan's been amortized and every month they're paying some money towards the principal pay down. Or is there proven exchange value? Did they give them a car or a boat or something like that as a down payment? Is the note seasoned? Have they been making payments over a period of time? Okay. Usually it's a 6 months minimum. I will say this, if they haven't put at least 10% down, then usually I'm going to want to see at least 12 months of seasoning as a general rule of thumb. And then we want to look at the pay history. Have they been making payments on time? And then I always like to try to look at their external credit. Okay. If it is a second mortgage, just as a kind of a general rule of thumb is, if I am going to be buying a second, I want it to be at least 1/4 of the amount of the first. And why is that? Like I had somebody recently call me, and it was something like there was $1 million loan and there was a little $25,000 second mortgage. Now, that sounds like a great deal. If it's secured by a $2 million property, hey, you got $1 million worth of equity securing this $25,000 note. But keep in mind that if that person defaults on that note, in order to protect a little $25,000 note, you might be making payments on $1 million mortgage. And that payment could be more than the $25,000 that you originally lent. So that's just a general rule of thumb if you are considering buying the performing seconds. Okay, we are not discussing the non-performing seconds. That is a totally different animal. Okay, so the bottom line is, with proper evaluation, you can ensure that your investment is safe. Okay, so I don't really want to go over the numbers now. We will save that for another webinar. I just wanted to give you an overview of how to evaluate the note. So I hope you have found this to be helpful, especially if you're using the coaching program and you're going out and finding notes and then submitting them to me. If you can do just an initial evaluation, that's really helpful. It'll save both of us a lot of time. I do want to share with you about the Academy. If you'll take me to the Academy page, Matthew. Before I jump into that, I do want to mention this. I had a student send me an email today, and I'm hoping you're on here, but if not, I was going to call you tomorrow. And the question was about they're wanting to come to the Academy, and they said they've been burnt before, and is there an upsell that so many times, and listen, I totally know who they're talking about. There are a number of different so-called gurus out there. Well, they are gurus, but the fact is, are they genuine teachers? Are they committed to teaching this business to other people, or are they just committed to putting money in their pocket? And there are a lot of people out there that offer some type of a boot camp, and you come to the boot camp, and they'll offer it really cheap, sometimes even free. But when you get there, they don't really teach you much of anything. And instead, they're going to upsell you to a $10,000 package or a $20 or $30 or $40,000 package. And so the question was, is that what the Academy is all about? Well, I invite you to go to the Academy page and check out the testimonials, because my Academy is so thorough that people come back 3, 4, 5 times. And they come back because they always get more information from that, okay? So watch those testimonials and you will see. And I think what you have to do is you have to look at the person that you're dealing with. I think by now you all know that I'm committed to helping each one of you. I have been offering coaching for almost 30 years, free if you bought my master guide, okay? I include a limited amount of coaching. Right now I'm including 6 months of free coaching with it. And I don't know anybody else who does that, but for many years, most of my students have learned through my home study course and through the coaching that I offer. I call it my easiest 1, 2, 3 coaching package. Now, we have recently, within the past year, introduced an advanced coaching package. And if you're interested in that, email Matthew at info@thenotebuyer.com. He'll be happy to tell you all about it. The advanced coaching is for the people that just need a little bit of hands-on. They don't like just to read a manual or watch a video. And so the advanced coaching gives you access to me once a month. We do group webinars. Like, for example, everybody can watch this webinar tonight, but if you're in the advanced coaching, tomorrow night, we're going to discuss what we just talked about tonight. So my advanced coaching students will have an opportunity to ask me questions and to go through things. And it's a great way to personally connect with me. So if you're interested in something like that, talk to Matthew and he can tell you all about it. But then I offer even a more in-depth thing, and this gets right to the heart of your question. Do I offer an expensive upsell after you come to the Academy? Yes, I do. I recently, it was actually at the last Academy, I now have a mastermind group. And this is a group of people that want to take their note buying to a completely different level. They own properties. They may already own a few notes, or they own properties and they're looking to integrate notes into their portfolio. These are people that want to excel, not just in note buying and real estate, but in every area of their life. I personally belong to a mastermind group, and it's the best thing I ever did. And people say, yeah, but it's like $1,000 a month and $10,000 or whatever it is. It can be different amounts. But you know what? That is money that I am investing in my future. Okay. And everybody needs a coach, even Olympic gold medalists. Guess how they got there? With coaches. And so, yes, I do offer a more expensive upsell, if you will, as it's called. But it's not for everybody. If it is for you and you think you might be interested, by all means, email me at info@thenotebuyer.com, because I would love to talk to you and tell you more about it. But for most people, the Academy is the way to go. And Matthew, if you'll take me to the Academy page, I'd like to share with them what the Academy is all about. I have been holding academies for almost 20 years. And by far, my most successful students are the ones that come to the Academy. This is 4 days of intensive training. Okay. So, and a lot of people, like, I have a lot of people that just use the home study course, and they watch the Academy media set, the videos that come with it, and they listen to the audio that comes with it, and the manual and everything. But the fact is, I don't know about you, but I like to set aside a particular amount of time and just go focus And I say, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to block everything else out. And so that's what the Academy allows you to do. It is 4 days of intensive training on every aspect of note buying. Okay. Now, if you want to go to the notebuyer.com, you can go to that, scroll down here. This tells you what you're going to learn. I've got a list here. And basically, in a nutshell, you're going to learn everything about all facets of note buying. It can be about buying and selling the seller carrybacks, by investing in them or flipping them. It can be about non-performing notes. It can be about creating notes. If you're a landlord and you're trying to figure out how to convert into passive income instead of being an active landlord, if you're looking for an exit strategy for your properties, it can be private lending. We're going to talk about all of these things at the Academy. So any of that we'll go over. I mentioned testimonials. If you want to know what the Academy's like, click on one of these videos and you'll find out people love the Academy. It is an experience, okay? It is not a boot camp. It is an experience. When we get done with the Academy, everybody feels like family. It's not only a place to learn, but it is a place to make connections. You're going to find people that you'll be doing business with, that you'll be buying and selling notes with. You know, you might be sitting next to someone that has a great investor for commercial properties, and you might have mobile home investors or whatever. And so you might be able to trade deals with them. But check this out. Listen to the Academy testimonials when you get a chance. Here, just to tell you a little bit about the Academy, basically, I teach for 4 days. This is not a dog and pony show of speakers. I cannot emphasize that enough. You are getting me in person, live, teaching and interacting with you. One of the things that I want to do is you'll see that we last year we had round tables, and we're going to do that again this year. We'll divide into groups, and I'm going to give you like some real deals that I have had that I've evaluated. And you'll be able to evaluate the deals together and work them together. You'll be able to calculate quotes. We do role playing where someone comes up and they pretend to be the note seller. I've actually had where somebody brought a note that they wanted to sell, and I've even got on the phone and called the note seller and negotiated the deal right in front of the class. I mean, it's very much a hands-on, interactive type of class. It is not me just sitting up there just giving you information. It's all about learning, and that's why I'm encouraging you to watch this video series ahead of time. The more that you can learn ahead of time before you come, the more you're going to get out of the Academy. Because if you're like me, I need to hear something 2 or 3 times before I really, really, really get it. And so to get the most out of it, please do watch these webinars. At the very least, you should have, you do need to have my Note Buyer's Master Guide before you come to the Academy. That is a prerequisite. And as part of that, you will get the previous year's media set. At least listen to the previous year's media set so you have an overview of what is going on. So in addition to me teaching and working with you, there's no way that I can go for 12 hours straight. We will also have some guest speakers. Alan Cowgill is always one of my featured speakers because he teaches on private lending. And private lending and note buying go hand in hand. So I think you'll really get a lot out of his presentation. My son, Ben, many of you know him. He is a licensed attorney. People love to pick his brain about asset protection strategies as well as estate planning. And it's great just to have him available to ask legal questions. So I always make sure that I have time to have him share. Bill Griesmer is one of my students. He's going to be there sharing some deals. And so there'll be a lot of other people that are participating to help you to get the very most out of the Academy. Okay. You can also see where we network. I actually supply all of the food. And I know that's unusual, but I think it's important because I hate to go someplace and then when it's lunchtime, I spend half of the lunch hour going to find a place to eat. So we hold this at the Radisson Hotel. It's an iconic hotel right on the riverfront. It's actually in Covington, overlooking the Cincinnati riverfront. It's the one with the revolving restaurant. And here we are. If you see here, this is us up on the 16th floor. They have a great chef there, and I supply your lunches and dinners. We have a continental breakfast in our meeting room, but this gives you a chance to really get to know and network everyone, and at the same time, enjoy a good meal. One of the biggest complaints I get is everybody says they gained 10 pounds in those 4 days. And it's not because they have to. We offer some really healthy choices, but there's plenty of food. And so if you like eating, you'll love going up on the 16th floor or even the 18th floor in the revolving restaurant and get some really good food while you network and talk about notes. Okay, so then if we go back up here, who will benefit from this? Basically, it's like I mentioned before, whether you're a landlord wanting to divest or transfer and get into more passive income, if you're wanting to supplement your current income, you need a lump sum of cash, whether you're wanting to build your retirement. You know, one thing that I really want to stress, I don't know if you heard my webinar a couple months ago with Mark Halpern, but people think that you have to get into note buying full time. That is not true. It would be worth your while to come to the Academy just to learn to do 1 or 2 deals a year. I'm talking about investing 40 hours a year in your retirement. Do you think you could handle that? Because each deal takes about 15 to 20 hours to do. So if you can do that, that webinar that I did with Mark, I actually ran the numbers. If you have $100,000, maybe you're a professional person and you don't have time to really deal with building your retirement, then let me tell you, you can't afford not to come to the Academy, because I can show you with a limited amount of money and a limited amount of time how you can grow your like $100,000 in 10 years. You can grow that to well over $1 million just doing 1 or 2 deals a month. Now, mind you, I don't want you just to take that and say, oh, Donna says you got to have $100,000 to get started. You don't need a dime to get started making money in notes. I was babysitting for $1 an hour just to make ends meet. And I did my first deal and it's changed my life. But I'm saying that note buying is for everyone, whether you have money or you don't have money, whether you have credit, you don't have credit, whether you're full-time, part-time, it doesn't matter. There's something for notes that will help you to invest in your financial future. And that's what I'm about, helping you to tailor make a game plan that fits your lifestyle. I don't want you to change your life. I want you to change your quality of life. Okay, but you don't have to quit your job to do note buying. You can do note buying right along with your present job. Okay, so keep in mind that note buying is indeed for everyone. Okay, so right now, if you want to know about the details of the Academy, you can just click right here. I went to Academy and then I put register now. This tells you all about the offer. And right now we've got our early bird special going on. The Academy is usually $2,497, and you can come at a discount right now for only $1,797, and that is for one person. Keep in mind, it cost me over $500 just for each person for food. And I forgot to mention, I also take you on a riverboat cruise. On Saturday night, we break loose of the classroom and we go out and we go on the B&B riverboat, and we'll go up the river about an hour and a half, have a really nice dinner, and then come back down. It's an awesome way, after being in the class for 3 days. And again, it's a great place to network and get to know everybody. It's just a lot of fun. You can see a picture of us right here. This is us on the boat having a great time. Okay. And so that cost me, with the food and the cruise and all, it's about $500 a person. And so if you want to bring a partner, that can be a spouse, a legitimate business partner, it's only $600, and that's primarily to cover my costs for them. You do need the master guide to attend. Now, I hope you've stuck with me this long, because I do have a special offer. I have a special bonus that you can do. Let's say that you want to come by yourself. So you'd click here, registration for one, add to the cart, and that is $1,797. That should take us here. Did I do something wrong there?
It's already in the cart. So just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the cart up there.
Okay, but I wanted to show them how to use the bonus. Can I still do that? So the deal is that you can get 10% off if you put in the coupon code mailbox money. Okay, mailbox money. Write that down, because you're going to want to use it. And it's all one word and no caps. And as Matthew is showing you, you just click on coupon code, you type in mailbox money, apply the code, and that will give you 10% off of the early bird special. Okay, the super early bird special, I should say. And so with that code, you can register for only $1,617. So take advantage of that. And I hope that you will seriously consider joining me at the Academy. Check out the testimonials and see. I know if you are serious and you want to learn notes, like I said, whether it's part-time, whether it's full-time, whatever, by all means, I hope that you can clear your schedule and come to the Academy. I promise you that you will thoroughly love it, and you will get so much out of it. It will be the best thing that you can do to improve your financial future. So with that, I think we've just about covered everything. Matthew, can you think of anything I might have forgot?
I don't think so. That was a great webinar. Good job.
Okay, awesome. So again, if you're interested, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@thenotebuyer.com. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I hope you can make it to the Academy, but if not, I at least hope to see you on the next webinar next month. Many blessings to you. Have a good night.